Sup nerds and welcome back to the Helpware Nerds podcast. Today I'm on my own for the first time and we're going to be talking about Avatar The Last Airbender. Specifically the Avatar The Last Airbender as done by Netflix. Now you guys did vote for this episode a while back. I did a poll about whether we should do an episode on Avatar The Last Airbender, and I wasn't sure whether to do it on the Netflix adaptation, the animated series, or the dreaded M. Night Shyamalan movie. So that's what's took me some time to get around to doing this, figuring out what to do it on, and who to do it with, and we've come to the conclusion that it might be best if I do this one on my own. So that's why you're just getting me. So let's strap in and yeah, hope you guys enjoy just listening to me. I do love the fact that we actually get to see what happened with the Air Nomads when Sozin attacked during the first pass of the comet, which it's a different thing. Like, obviously for us, all we really know is that Aang flew away. When we see the animated show, we don't know what happened. Like, obviously we see the remains, but we don't see the battle that ensued between Sozin and the Air Nomads at the temple. So getting to see that was a treat. But the downside, I think, to that is Aang leaving because he needed to clear his mind, rather than Aang leaving because he didn't want the responsibility of being the Avatar. And also because the Air Nomads were going to take him away from Gyatso. Now, in the show from the Netflix adaptation, Aang went down trying to return to the Air Temple, which isn't quite what happened in the animated show. So Aang's guilt throughout this season is a big thing, and it will bring me to another point that I have throughout the show of the Netflix adaptation. And I think a lot of people have had this point, because the main reason that I've chosen to do the Netflix adaptation is because they've released the teaser trailer for the second season with Toph, and so that's what spurred me into doing that. I thought it would be thematic if we released this episode around the same time. So my biggest complaint of the Avatar live action TV series is that in book 1, Aang does not learn waterbending throughout the entirety of the first season, which is dumb. I'm sorry to say, Netflix, but that is dumb. In the show, Aang and Katara both learn waterbending simultaneously on their travels. It's not just Katara learning and coming up with new techniques. Aang is learning alongside Katara. It's rudimentary, just like with Katara, but he is learning with her. And then they get to the Northern Water tribe, and Katara and Aang are trained by Pakku after Katara proves herself to Pakku, because, as Avatar fans will know, and if you're not an Avatar fan and you're watching this video to get some insight, Pakku wouldn't train Katara through tradition and sexism, basically, until Katara basically put him in his place and showed that girls can do it too. So, which the animated show did a lot better. I feel like the performance, no hate to the actress, I'm not sure if it was direction or not, no hate to the actress, but the direction for the Pakku versus Katara fight in the Netflix live action was a lot more wooden and less emotional than it was in the animated series. Like Katara stood on business in the animated series, and had a attitude to her that I don't think was translated into the live action show. Now, I'm not trying to just shit on the live action show. I actually like I said, I actually really do like some of the elements they added. The 41st Legion for Zuko's backstory being part of why he spoke out at the War Council. And also it not being that he just insulted the general, but it being he insulted the war plans that Ozai had just approved, meaning it wasn't the general's plan anymore. It was Ozai's plan because Ozai approved it, and then Zuko called it stupid. So he insulted Ozai's intelligence by that logic. I did like that change. I also liked the fact that Zuko actually did fight in the Agni Kai. He just couldn't strike Ozai out of respect and love for his father. But Ozai saw that as a weakness rather than out of respect for his father, whereas Iroh saw it for what it truly was. Azula learning the wrong lesson from that. Like, anyone else that watched it would have probably sided with Zuko, but she immediately sided with Ozai. Um, and I do like that Iroh told the 41st Legion this story. However, we don't see it that way. We just keep seeing the flashbacks until the scene where Iroh is like, "Have you ever wondered why you were assigned to the ship?" I know I'm jumping around different episodes. It's because I'm like talking about what I like and what I don't like about the show. Um, so it does it. There are points to jumping around. That is, while I'm talking on the point of jumping around, that's another point that I actually really did like that the show did, that I think it did better. Bumi's tests for Aang in the animated series, while they were clever and they like showed that Aang just needed to learn certain things and also figure out that Bumi was Bumi. In this, I feel like it gave Bumi a bit more character as to being felt left behind by one of his closest friends who he knew was the Avatar. And also the fact that Bumi needed Aang to realize that being the Avatar meant he would have to make tough decisions. He didn't just get to play games anymore. And I feel like that's what Bumi was trying to illustrate, at least in this version. I don't know if I'm the only one that thought that or not. Um, there are. I like how they did the Avatar interactions rather than Aang just being able to call on the past Avatar spirits as well. Him going to each individual shrine of the past Avatars and being able to talk to them. And we got to see more than one Avatar mentioned. So, like, yes, Kyoshi is mentioned at Kyoshi Island. And yes, we get Roku mentioned. And we know of Avatar Yang Chen and Kuruk, mainly because of season 3, where they're called forth by Aang for advice before he deals with the Fire Lord in the animated series. Seeing them this early on, though, I did like how they've done that because it gives Aang some connection, especially with Yang Chen having um master his master Monk Gyatso. His name went out of my head then, and we did a fun fact not long ago, being how Monk Gyatso and Tenzin was named after the Dalai Lama, Tenzin Gyatso. So I can't believe his name went out of my head. But so yeah, fun fact there. Tenzin, who is Aang's son in Legend of Korra, and Monk Gyatso, when you put their name together, Tenzin Gyatso, that's the Dalai Lama. So, which actually inspired the reincarnation cycle of the Avatar. So, the more you know. You know, that. But, yes. Anyway, back to my point. I like how Monk Gyatso did take him to Yangchen, and then we saw Kuruk in the Battle for the North. We saw Kyoshi defending Kyoshi Island. I do like how they skipped over the island with where Aang was put on trial. They like combined elements from both of those. So Kyoshi showed up and did some awesome bending as in Aang's body, which is an element from when Aang was put on trial for the murder of General. I forget where that was, but that also connects to the formation of Kyoshi Island. And then, so they've just moved that element to Kyoshi Island. I know some people didn't like the fact that we're seeing the downsides to Azula off the bat. I actually did, because we're not seeing it as she is in the show, where she's automatically just a military strategist. We're seeing her in her trauma area, where she's with Ozai. So we get to see how she responds to how Ozai treats her straight away, rather than at the end of season 3. So it's kind of hinting at the fact that her mental state isn't stable. But I feel like when we see her in season 2, she'll be the militaristic, strategic Azula that we know from the show, because she's outside of Ozai's direct influence. So she's acting on her own instincts, her own intelligence. And because Ozai's not there micromanaging and manipulating her as he was in season 1, we'll see the Azula we're familiar with from the show. And I feel like that's what they were playing with. I also I like seeing Wan Chi Tong in the spirit world during the Heibai episode, and seeing Ko the Face Stealer. I'll be honest, I did jump when he popped up to take Katara and Sokka. That was creepy as hell. But like, I did love how they did that. And Heibai's monstrous form was creepy. The secret tunnel into Amashu brings like a creepy element to the badger moles, but also shows that they react to emotion. So it'll be fun to see how they adapt that with Toph, because we know that they're gonna keep that part of her element. Because for those of you that don't know, Toph learned earthbending. I nearly said metal bending. Learned earthbending from the first Airbender. She was taught how to earthbend by emulating them, because like the badger moles, Toph is blind. So they have the same sort of abilities. Like the seismic sense, you'll see it in the teaser. She kind of moves her foot and everything goes grey. Kind of similar to how Daredevil sees the world. She sees it all through vibrations in her feet. It's very similar to how the badger moles can sense movement and emotion and stuff like that, and be able to move around. And she developed that by learning from them. So it'll be interesting how they develop their relationship, especially because they showed how scary badger moles can be in the Amashu episode, with them going through the Cave of Two Lovers. It was a weird but interesting choice to have Sokka and Katara be the ones to go through that cave instead of Aang being there. But each to their own, I guess. I can kind of see why they might have done that rather than speed it up. They also did miss out the fortune teller in season one. I believe it's season one that the fortune teller shows up. So they've not had much romantic hintings for Aang and Katara as of yet. Maybe they'll do that in season two. Um, like I said, there were some key elements missing. Aang didn't waterbend once. Katara didn't really show any motherly instincts. I don't think, which is one of her key defining traits in the animated show. Sokka wasn't really that much of a comedian either. Like, there was a few times, and at the end of the season, they made a joke about him always thinking about his stomach, but we've not seen that once in the show until like the very end. Um, Now that's a trait of the original Sokka, but not the Sokka we've come to know in this because they've skipped key like points of showing that. And I do feel like Aang's main focus has been on moving past the fact that he wasn't there for 100 years. So we haven't seen much of his playfulness either, or and stuff like that. So I do feel like they've watered down some of the characters in the Netflix adaptation. I'm hoping like in season two they fill in some of these gaps and stuff like that, and that they develop these moments in there. Because I feel like they did Zuko really well, and I feel like they did Iroh really well as well. Like they kept him as the wise sage with a fetish for tea, which that is Iroh. So I feel like they did Iroh and Zuko really well, but I feel like the main group had some of their character lost in development. I don't know why. Um, Also, they rushed through the Suki and Sokka romance bit with Suki usually Sokka being a bit I wouldn't some people would say misogynistic, I would say cocky about his warrior skills and thinking he's better than the girls, and then Suki puts him in his place, and there's a bit of tension there, but it's not really there yet, and then it develops. Uh, they kind of did the same thing with the UA thing, where there is a bit of romantic tension there, and they do kind of fall for each other, but she is engaged in the animated show. Like, she hasn't called off the engagement in the animated show, but she's called off the engagement in the live action show, so that barrier's not there. And so there's the tension of they like each other but they can't be together because she's engaged isn't there. And then she becomes the moon, and then you get the famous meme of my first girlfriend turned into the moon. That's rough, buddy. You know, you'll have seen that on the internet. Um, but like, um, yeah, I do feel like they've speedrun some of it, and then they've left some of it out quite a bit, and I don't know why they've roughed out some of the edges. I'm worried that they're gonna do that to Toph because she comes across really brazen, and that's like how she is because she's an earthbender, but she's very very caring, and she does really care about her friends and family, but she's also very sheltered, very coddled, and just says it how it is. Um, so I'm like I said, the only character I feel like they've given some depth to and added depth to is Zuko. Um, so I'm worried that they're gonna keep like grinding down these characters a little bit. Uh, they did try and add a little bit to Sokka, but they'd already took so much away from what Sokka was in the animated show that I don't think it landed as well, at least for me, by giving him that backstory of a coda not thinking Sokka was going to be a great warrior and stuff like that. But Sokka just kept piping on about the fact that he was a warrior and a warrior and a warrior. And it's like, yeah, but we haven't really seen you do any warrior stuff. Like, there's been a couple of fights, but we haven't seen you do anything really. Same with Katara. Until like the North, we hadn't really seen them do much. So it did feel like they speed ran some stuff, and the only one that really got to do any fighting was Aang. But like I said, hopefully they fix that in season 2. I am looking forward to season 2. I did like how they did earthbending. It was a lot better than the M. Night Shyamalan disaster where they had 6 earthbenders to move a pebble. Where, at least in this, you actually have them picking up boulders with their hand like this and slicing earth apart and throwing rubble and stuff like that. The firebenders did not need existing fire. The Agni Kai ending between Zuko and Ozai was awful to watch, where Ozai burned Zuko's face. Although I wish the scar was better pronounced. I feel like it's barely visible, in my opinion. Like, you can kind of see it, but it doesn't really look like there's anything there. Whereas in the animated show, it like covers from here all the way down to about here. So I do wish that they'd made it a bit more pronounced on his face. And I do like that we get Iroh's tragedy sprinkled in throughout the show. Like, they don't just drop an episode where they tell you about Lu Ten. Lu Ten is sprinkled throughout the episode when he's arrested by the Earth soldiers in Umashu and beaten up. We get the flashback of Zuko comforting him at Lu Ten's funeral, while he's also being ridiculed for abandoning the siege of Ba Sing Se. And then Zuko keeps mentioning how Lu Ten would be proud of them and stuff like that. So I do feel like they've done really well with all that. I just feel like, and I don't think I'm the only one, sometimes animation should stay animation. And I'm not a purist. Like I said, I do like this live action adaptation. I don't think it's bad. I just don't think it's translated as well. I feel like they've watered down too much and speed ran through too much. Whereas the animated series is one of the best shows I've ever seen. Zuko's redemption arc is chef's kiss. It's one of the best redemption arcs ever written. You'll find countless videos on YouTube and countless like essays and things like that talking about how Zuko's redemption arc, from being the main series antagonist in book 1 to being the guy that teaches Aang firebending in book 3 and becoming a central member of Team Avatar by the end of the war. It's perfect. It's done absolutely flawlessly. It's gorgeous. The conflict in Zuko is absolutely fantastic. And the way that they've speed ran and dulled things makes me worried for how they're going to actually handle Zuko's conflict in season 2 and his eventual redemption in season 3. Because yes, they've set the stage for it with the Division 41, 42, I think It's either 41 or 42. The number's gone out of my head. I think it's 41. The 41st, yeah. The 41st division. Um, and the and why he called out things like that in the War Council. But just setting the stage isn't bringing it home. And I don't feel like from the start of the series where we met Aang and we saw the devastation of the Air Nomads to the final episode where Legends, where Aang took down the Fire Nation at the north and defeated Zhao, I don't think they brought it home in the first season. Like, the scenes in the fight between Katara and Parku was built up so well in the animated series, and it falls flat. The death of the moon spirit and the battle between Aang becoming the spirit fish and decimating them is built up so well in the animated series. The fact that Zuko can't keep the Avatar is built up so well in the animated series. And the mystery of the Fire Lord, because in the animated series you do not see Ozai at all until the final series, is built up so well that I don't feel like they've built up enough here. Like, they've not set the deadline for Aang of the comet. We know about the comet. The comet was told to us as the audience because Ozai has a meeting with the Fire Sage who says it's coming soon. That's so that they could do a time skip because they didn't know when they were going to be done filming season 2 and 3 and how old the actors would look. Which is a good thing because if you've seen the teaser trailer, Aang noticeably looks older. So, good on them. But, still, Aang knows nothing about the comet. That was set up at Roku's temple in season 1. Roku tells him about the comet and the fact that it will be here by year's end. The fact that we've not got that set up means there's no, stakes. Aang doesn't... Obviously, there's the war, but there's no, rush for Aang to learn waterbending, earthbending, firebending. There's a big rush in the show. He has to master all 4 elements before the comet arrives, and if he doesn't, that's it. The Fire Nation wins. But without that information, there's no rush for Aang to master anything. And no wonder he didn't learn waterbending throughout the entire first season, because there was no reason for him to rush to learn it. So can you even call the first season Book 1 Water? Yes, it ends with a battle with the waterbenders, but that's it. So I think what I'm trying to say is I feel like the animated series set the bar here. The movie set the bar here. So low it's not even on screen. And the animated the live action TV series is somewhere here. It's not bad. It's not great. And it's not terrible. It's just I am looking forward to seeing what they do with Toph in season 2 and how they progress the story. I'm just worried. I could have gone through each episode, but I feel like that would have been more of a review. And that's not really what I was doing. I was just talking about the show and what I think worked and what I don't think worked. I do think some of the performances were wooden. I do think that some of the choices were rushed. And I do think that some of the add-ons were great. But that's it, really. I haven't really got much more to say on this topic. Let me know if you want us to do a video on the animated series and why I think it sits here and why it's so much more peak than the live action TV series. Because this is where I would rank them. This is the animated series and this is the live action series. But yeah, with that then, guys, I think I'm gonna leave it here. If you're watching on YouTube, don't forget to like, subscribe, and ring that notification bell to stay up to date for when we drop new content. And yeah, I'll see you in the next one. Stay happy, stay healthy, and most of all, stay nerdy.